Sababa, where life takes a spin. Join the fun, let the talk begin.
Okay, so welcome to Hakol Sababa. Today we have the fearless online warrior, David Lange, who's famous for the Israellycool website and has been an amazing voice for Israel advocacy online. And we're going to find out more about your backstory. Let's just start with where you come from, how you got here, what path led you down this avenue.
Okay, so I'm originally from Australia, which I think is stating the obvious once I open my mouth. Although you'd be surprised how many people think I'm South African.
And how many people think I'm Australian.
I don't know. Okay, so I made Aliyah in 2000. So coming up to, well, over 24 years ago, if my math serves me correct. Yeah. I'm obviously skipping some details. So, I mean, how did I get to Israel to begin with? So, you know, I was brought up secular Jewish household in Perth, Western Australia. And around the age of 18, I found God, as it were. Again, skipping over some details. But, you know, I kind of felt I needed to look a bit more into things. But my parents wanted me to continue with my university education. I was studying law and finance at university. And I actually wanted to, after school, do a gap year in Israel on some sort of kibbutz, some real secular kind of program. And my parents, let's say, they bribed me, instead of taking a year off university, to do like a 6-week program in New York. And this was it was called Counterpoint. So I don't know if you're familiar with Counterpoint. No. In Australia, they would bring counsellors out from like Yeshiva University to run camps in Australia, in Perth, and I think also in Melbourne. And this was like a reverse Counterpoint where they were going to bring some kids out to America just for 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. And you know, you just living the life there a bit amongst the Orthodox or the modern Orthodox community of Washington Heights, you know, Yeshiva University.
Right.
And my parents thought that might be a good idea instead of me taking a year off, but it kind of backfired because, you know, I said, yeah, great, I want a trip to New York, it'll be fun. But, you know, I actually got a taste of religious life. And when I say religious life, I mean modern Orthodox life, which for me was like a revelation. I didn't actually know that kind of lifestyle existed. In my mind, it was like Meir Sherim or bust in terms of religion.
Right. Well, I mean, what's the Perth Jewish community like?
I mean, I can't talk for it now because I haven't been there for a long time. And it's much more. There are many more religious people there, so you get a much more accurate view of what it is to be religious. Mm-hmm. But back then, there were like a handful of religious people or families.
Mostly ex-South Africans, I'm sure.
No, back in my day, I won't age myself, but this is going back before the first exodus from South Africa, well before.
The first exodus from South Africa is like still going on. I mean, it's
a
constant...
Right. No, but back in my day, like really, you know, I was very young, so I didn't really have a mature, nuanced take on what it meant to be a religious person. Yeah. And in my mind, it was like you were just giving up on everything and taking on a bunch of things, which I didn't really understand. Although I did go to an Orthodox Jewish school, and you know, but I didn't really get that, you know, that kind of belief or understanding.
Sort of an Orthodox school, is that? I'm just thinking, like, is it similar to King David in Johannesburg? I don't know if you know King David at all.
I've heard about it a lot.
Right, because like I went to King David, which was a secular Zionist Jewish day school, but whatever Jewish stuff we got was Orthodox.
Exactly. So it was like that. Look, I think now it's a lot different. I mean, it is very Orthodox, right? But still, now, from what I understand, is that the Jewish studies program is much more advanced. That there are many students who are actually religiously observant. They go there. Back in my day, because Perth was such an isolated community, it was the only Jewish day school. Yeah. And no matter what your religiosity, the religiosity of your household, your parents would send you there to kind of prevent you from intermarrying. That was kind of like the crux of it. But 99.9% of the students, including yours truly, were not in the slightest bit religious.
Sounds like King David.
So it was the 0.01% that I looked at and I didn't really understand. Although one of my best friends growing up back then was a religious guy, and you know, but I didn't really get much out of that in terms of understanding. I love the guy, but I don't really recall, you know, celebrating many Shabbatot or anything like that with him or understanding. So when it came to going to New York after my school education on this this trip, just being there
was it actually
created a longing within me, something that I was missing, because I think I was always very spiritual.
Yeah.
But now, along with that spirituality that I had, the intrinsic spirituality, I now had a bigger understanding of what it meant to be religiously observant, and the fact that it didn't mean having to just change your entire world. You could somehow integrate your, not secular, but your modern lifestyle with that sort of added component of spirituality and, observance. So to cut a long story short, although I guess it's already been pretty long, so
that's okay.
I'll cut it a bit.
We got lots
cut
of time.
Our losses.
We got lots of
time.
time.
Yeah, we'll cut our losses a bit. I went back to study, to continue with my law degree, my law and finance degrees, but I was very restless.
This is at YU?
At UWA. Sorry, I went back to Australia.
Oh, you went back
I didn't stay in New York, yeah. I came back to Australia. YU was just, we're sitting in on Torah classes. We weren't there like actually students. We were there as, and we went to Shabbat houses, houses for Shabbat, all sorts of things like that, just living the lifestyle. So I came back, and I was just, it was really weird because, university is a time to explore and you're in the big wide world, and now I'm exposed to way more non-Jewish people including the opposite sex. And, I did enjoy, let's say, partying and this sort of stuff. But at the same time, I wanted to proceed with this self-discovery process. So it was this weird situation where, like, there'd be lunchtimes where I'd go to the tavern, the pub, with my friends, we'd drink beers and all this sort of stuff. But other times I'd go to the library and, take a cap out of my bag, and I'd put it on my head, and I'd take a Jewish sefer or something that I bought, and I'd start learning in the library. I kind of had this weird...
I'm curious, what seferim were you interested in?
Okay, no, actually, with the one I can think of, I didn't actually buy it. It was one that I got. It was the Book of Our Heritage, which I got for my bar mitzvah. And I remember at my bar mitzvah, when I was unpacking all the presents, of course, when I got all the checks and the money, I was really happy. And this was one of the gifts I remember at the time, which I wasn't happy about.
Like, what am I going to do with this?
What am I going to do with this? Now, 6 years later, I took it off the bookshelf, and it's a fantastic book for a beginner into Judaism. So, it goes through all the festivals and everything in a very clear way. So I was kind of gobbling that up. I hadn't gone to, I didn't buy a Talmud or anything like that. I wasn't at that level yet.
Right.
But that's where the next part of the story comes in, because by the end of the year, I decided I'm taking a year off and I'm going to study in yeshiva. I just have to fulfill this, or continue with this process till its fruition. Whether that be I decide I'm going to go on this path and that's going to be my life, or not. But I can't sort of keep it half-hearted like this. Yeah. So that's why I mentioned at the outset that my parents' plan backfired, because I ended up taking a year off. It was more disruptive because I'd already started. So I paused my degrees. And then I went to yeshiva for a year, and then I came back, and that was also interesting because it wasn't like, okay, zero. I was definitely all in on this, but it still took me a bit of time to kind of find the path in terms of how to balance everything out. And that was a gradual process, but because I think it was a gradual process, it sort of stuck with me. You see a lot of people, or guys that and gals, that become Baal Tshuva, and sometimes they hit it too hard, they go all in, and sometimes that works for them. Yeah. But sometimes if you go too quickly in it, you can go out of it very quickly as well. You from out too quickly, as it were. Yeah. With me, it was a gradual process, because it wasn't just a matter of understanding, it was a matter of feeling, it was a matter of trying to see what sort of lifestyle I was going to lead and how to integrate all the parts to it. Yeah. And, it's a very weird age. Everything's changing for you at that age. So now that I've got kids that age...
For me, I have similar experiences. That was exactly when I was Chozeh B'Tshuva. I was also age 20.
Okay.
So it's... so
that was my rebellion.
I can really relate to the age thing. And that.
So that's the cut long story short. So and then I was working for an oil company in Australia, and when I was working
after you finished your degree.
Yes.
So hang on, you took a year off in yeshiva or what?
Yeah, in the Efrat.
In Efrat,
okay. Provenzes. Amivta.
Right.
Yeah, which was recommended to me by some of the counterpoint people. And I found that very fulfilling, and I made lifelong friendships, people that I'm still friendly with to this day. Yeah. And I've even reacquainted with them. So that was that. And then I worked for this oil company, and as part of this, so I never wanted to be a lawyer, even though I continued with the degrees. And I ended up working for an oil company, being in the management program. And they, as part of the management program, they sent me out to a really, Perth is really far out in the middle of nowhere, but this was in the beyond the middle of nowhere. It was in a mining town. So it was where, I'm going to say there were no Jews there, but funnily enough, talk about Jewish geography, there was like another Jew there, and he was my next door neighbor. I'm not even kidding. There's a guy I remembered from school who was a few years older than me. He was quite a well-known radio personality, and who's unfortunately, he's passed away since then, and he happened to be like my neighbor of all the places.
So this is all still in Western Australia?
It's in Western Australia, yeah. But I sort of sequestered myself in, I was keeping Shabbat by that point in time, and I sequestered myself in my house, and although I was friendly with everyone, and I would go out during the week, I would keep Shabbat, and I still kind of try to isolate myself a little bit because I didn't want to get too into the lifestyle.
What do you do on Shabbat when you're in the middle of the outback?
I was basically just learning and sleeping, learning and sleeping. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I somehow managed to get through that. And
how long were you there?
I was there for 6 months.
Right.
And because I was in the middle of nowhere, okay, so at that point in time, how old was I? I was about 24, 25. And I would go on the internet back then, and I would go on like dating sites because I wanted to find myself a good Jewish girl. I wasn't going to find one in Karatha, which is the place that I was at. Right. And I ended up finding a nice Jewish girl, and she happened to be in Israel. She didn't just happen to be in Israel. I deliberately, at this point in time, decided I want to go live in Israel. I don't want to be in a situation where I've got a job that maybe I'll be posted somewhere. I just decided, I really need to get back to Israel. So I deliberately went looking.
You filtered on
this
Israel.
Is in 1999. So when I talk about dating sites, it's not like it is now.
Yeah.
You don't slide, I wasn't sliding into anyone's Instagram DMs.
Right.
Back then, not that I've ever done that. But that's, what the kids do these days. Back then there was no social media. There was JDate and other things.
Right.
So to cut the long story slightly less long, so I met this lady who ended up becoming my wife. So we ended up.
Where was she from?
She was originally from California, but she lived in Israel, down south. I won't give too many details away. Right. But so we ended up getting married. I made Aliyah. Ended up having a very nice life. 5 kids. This is my late wife because, as you know, she passed away about 5.5 years ago of cancer. She had a very prolonged battle, quite a public battle. Maybe I'm not sure who your audience is, but I'm sure many of them might know. Ava Muna Lange, originally called Erica.
Anyone who's lived here for more than 5.5 years has probably heard the whole saga.
Especially your community and the community in this town or this city, if you can call it that. So so that's kind of like my backstory in terms of me getting to Israel, my personal life.
Right. And I remember Israellycool, I think, was one of the earliest Israel advocacy websites. I mean, it started out just as a website, am I right?
Yeah, right. So it started off as a blog.
A blog, exactly.
And a website, and I made it into a non-profit. So it's a full-on non-profit now since about 2020. So I left, I was in high tech all that time. I had a nice position in high tech. I worked my way up the ranks. When Erica got ill, it got to a point where, I was working part-time from home. I was like a caregiver for a lot of the time. It was getting really hard, but the company I worked for, SAP, I'll give them a plug. They were very kind to me. This is before COVID. So I was one of the early adopters also in terms of working from home. But they enabled me to do that, and they deserve the credit. But it got to a point where I could hardly do any work. I'd been a manager there, and I had to sort of demote myself. And I was doing some social media work, just sort of stuff that I could do from home. It's really hard, at least back then. Maybe
social media work for SAP?
Yeah. Maybe now after COVID, managers are allowed to work from home. But, as a people manager, I had to be there for my staff.
Right.
Fair enough. So everything changed, and then the beginning of 2019, SAP were letting people go, and through some negotiations with the German, the headquarters. It's a German company. It's a global company, but they're headquartered in Germany. and there's a work council, and they negotiated, instead of just sacking people, that they'd have voluntary retirement or retrenchment. And I think there were like about 75, instead of sacking 100 people, there was like about 75 places for people to put up their hands saying, me, please get rid of me. And there was a nice payout involved. Right. So I put up my hand, and there was no question I was going to be let go, given the situation and everything. And but it came at the right time, because anyway I was probably going to quit. So the golden handshake that I received gave me a bit of leeway to say, you know what, I'm going to go for Israellycool as a non-profit. Because this is a scary journey, and even to this day, I'm a bit like the hamster on the wheel. It's I've been, Israellycool's been around as a non-profit for now over 5 years, or coming up to 6 years. Sorry, 5.
And you're measuring that as like when you got Amotah status.
Well, yeah, no, but in terms of you're living on donations, so you're relying on people who believe in the cause to donate to the cause. Now, Israellycool has a very large following, and a lot of people appreciate it, but that doesn't always translate into donations. And I'm not the sort of person that likes to ask for donations, even though that's what you need in order to continue, because this is now a full-time endeavor. I put all in on this, even before October the 7th, obviously. Now there's a lot more people in the game, or in the field, especially since October the 7th. And there's this whole influencer culture that I don't really, I understand it, I don't relate to it. It's a different beast as far as I'm concerned. But what I'm saying is it's a constant, you're like the hamster on the wheel, because you need to keep getting donations. But because I had, this background in high tech, and then I was able to leave and get a bit of a payout, it gave me some years to not have too many donations and to continue the work and sort of build up, and then hopefully be able to continue into the future. So
this change happened how long ago?
2020 is when I officially became an Amotah. Israellycool became an Amotah. But I left SAP in 2019. So there was that year where...
Right. Well, and this is already after your wife had passed away.
She passed away in August 2019. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And so I mean, you started out as a blog. And let's just take us back to the beginning of Israellycool. Like, what made you get into it?
Good question, actually. The answer is, it was an accident.
like so many things.
I was just reading something online about blogs.
Yeah. It
was just like an article, and I'm like, okay, you know what? That sounds interesting, because I've always liked to write. I was very creative as a child, and then I kind of lost that. I also used to do cartoons. I was always into humor. I didn't really have a creative outlet. And, after I came to Israel, and you get very frustrated with a lot of things, I lacked that creative outlet. And then I heard about blogs. I'm like, I'm going to try this. And actually, the first blog entry had nothing to do with Israel. Even though the name is Israellycool, first of all, there's no wisdom or anything in the name. Some people love the name, and there are those like me that think it's very cringy. But I'm kind of stuck with it, because it's like a brand. It's a brand now. And when we'll talk a bit later about what the goal is with it, because I kind of developed a strategy over the years, but I didn't start off with a strategy. But the name doesn't really fit in with the strategy so much, but okay, I'm trying to work around that. So the first blog post was about cricket, if I remember correctly. I think it was about Shane Warne, the Australian cricketer. Like, completely nothing to do with Israel, because I just wanted to write. I was just trying things out.
Right.
But over time, it kind of became more Israel-centric, and that's because at a certain point in time, I wrote a post, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we had tried to, or had succeeded in eliminating a Hamas terrorist. His name was Rantizi. He was a doctor.
I remember.
One of these doctors by day, terrorists by night.
Wasn't Rantizi Hezbollah?
I think he was Hamas.
I may be
Potato,
wrong.
potato, Hamas, Hezbollah, same thing.
Okay,
I think it was Hamas, actually. I think it was Hamas. But I wrote this post about him, and then someone in Australia responded and reposted it. Now, again, this is in 2003. Not again, I'm now saying for the first time. I started this in 2003, so 22 years ago.
Wow.
Coming up, like next week, I think, is the 22nd anniversary of the blog. this is before Facebook, this is before social media.
That's right. It's before.
And for me, the blog was just like, I knew my parents were reading it and maybe some family members, but I didn't. And I'd look at the stats, and if you got 10 readers a day, you hit double figures. It was like really exciting.
A lot of people reading,
everything has kind of changed since then, obviously. No, but I really felt that way.
Yeah.
But to have, just put yourself in my position, to have a person all the way in Australia, I didn't know them. They were actually non-Jewish. They happened to be pro-Israel. And then he took my post and he agreed with it and he wrote on it. Then I realized, and then it got even more readers because people were visiting the link to his website, which contained the link to my website. And then it actually, Nafal al Simon, so the penny dropped that, wow, I could actually, do good with this. It doesn't have to just be a cathartic medium for me and a creative outlet, but I could actually do something with this. And then it just sort of gradually became that. And you had all these wars, the Second Lebanon War, and this is before Twitter. So I would do these live blogs. Now, if you look at the Times of Israel, for instance, the Jerusalem Post, they have live blogs all the time. But they didn't have live blogs then, and I would like to think they got it from websites like Israellycool. There was no such thing as a live blog.
Well, what is a live blog?
A live blog was where, instead of just writing one post, or a few posts a day and leaving every post, you write it, you press publish, and that's it.
Yeah.
It was like an open post for the day, and then I kept updating it with little information bits, 10 a.m., blah, blah, blah. And it was constantly updated. So if you look, for instance, on the Times of Israel, I think every day they have a live blog.
When they have developing news.
You keep refreshing the page and it has developing news. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was doing this while I had my day job. So that was kind of challenging to try to, between meetings and things quickly. But I kind of felt this responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility, right?
Right.
So I felt this responsibility, this big load on my shoulders, because it wasn't like it is now that there's so many advocates. I really was one of the only ones. There was a handful of us. And I was one of the only ones doing these live blogs. And again, there was social media was very undeveloped, if at all there. Mm-hmm. In 2006, I don't think it was there at all. I think I opened a Facebook account maybe in 2007 and Twitter in 2007. Yeah. It definitely wasn't, if it was around, it wasn't well used.
I was kind of blindsided by wait, what is this Facebook thing that everyone's talking about?
Yes. Now, obviously, it's taken a life of its own and it's become a very effective tool. And I've tried to integrate these tools with the advocacy. So it's not just the website, but they use the social media tools now, Instagram, TikTok even. But yeah, so that's kind of how it evolved, and it became more of a living up to its name, with the Israel in the name. It's very Israel focused now. I hardly ever. I might talk about certain things to do with issues that the West is dealing with in general, but it's all comes back to Israel and the Jewish people.
Yeah. Right. So the evolution of Israellycool from being a blog to what is it today?
Well, as I said, it's a non-profit. The main part of it is a website. So although at its core it's still a blog, because the structure of the website is there's a post or number of posts. So that's kind of like the blog format. Right. It looks like a website. It's kind of much more sophisticated looking.
Are you sort of integrated with X and...
Yes, as I said, so all the social media, or most of the social media platforms, so we have an X account, we have, of course, the Facebook page, we have Instagram, TikTok, there's also something called Blue Sky. I tried to be on a few other things.
Blue Sky is like the little echo chamber of people who don't want to hear opinions that don't conform to...
Yes, whereas X is more open.
So do you get kicked out of Blue Sky much?
I don't actually get kicked out. I just sort of post things and leave it. I'm not active there.
Yeah.
I would say I'm more active on Twitter and X because there's some discussions here. I try not to get too active because it's a cesspool of anti-Semitism and the worst, and you can go crazy. But there is much more engagement there, although I would say Israellycool's engagement has suffered a bit.
You're placing yourself in the battlefield over here. I mean, if you're going to sort of shy away from confrontation, that's you're not.
That's not what you can't.
You can't do that. And if the battlefront is happening on X, which is basically that is the town square of the world now, because I kind of get the feeling that Facebook is still kind of, families posting stuff and between friends and whatever, whereas X is like really where the town square is happening and people are getting up in their soapboxes and yelling.
It's one of the town squares. So I think Instagram is a town square for younger people, and TikTok apparently is
it's a different format. It's obviously a different format.
And I'm not I'm trying to be more active, especially on Instagram, because I see it's effective. And you can reach a younger demographic. You just have to be. What is
the difference between Instagram and TikTok?
Instagram is good. Well, one's Chinese owned and one's Facebook owned.
Yeah.
Oh God, I'm not an expert. From what I see, the TikTok is sort of like these kind of quicker, catchy. There are definitely similarities. Because I think Instagram started as a more of a photo-related app, but it's kind of developed into more videos, and they've taken things from other apps. Yeah. I think like Snapchat, they've taken concepts. I'm not such an expert. I'm kind of learning the ropes. What I can tell you is from my experience on TikTok, a lot of my Israellycool's content gets taken down, which shouldn't. And it's almost like 3 strikes, and I'm going to get banned for nothing. And it's hard to understand
because the hallway monitors there are.
I don't understand it. Instagram, you have more leeway, look, I'm not an expert on the differences, but that's kind of from my experience. And I think that young people really use those 2 apps, and I want to reach more young people. And Instagram seems to be people more our age and maybe a bit younger, and also even older, maybe the more mature types. People who maybe read a bit more and their attention span is a little bit more than 10 seconds. But, I have ADD, I think, so I can handle it.
So have you gotten into making those little short videos?
Well, I'm trying more. Like actually right before today, I told you I was going to be a few minutes late.
Yeah.
It's because I posted a rant against Roger Waters. And I posted that on Instagram as well as X. You can check that out afterwards. But I just felt the need, I've been writing about him for God knows how long.
Yes, right from the beginning.
And I kind of felt like enough's enough. I'm going to talk to him. But when I say talk to him, I don't expect him to necessarily pay attention to anything I'm saying. Whenever I post things, and I think this is one of my strategies with the advocacy, I always have in mind my target audience.
Yeah.
And the messaging. And it's not about, for instance, arguing with anti-Semites to try to get them to change their mind. That hardly ever happens.
Yes.
But it's the town square where the other people who are watching, you want to shine a light on the nastiness of your interlocutor, the anti-Semitic interlocutor. You want to shine a light on their lies, their hate, all these sorts of things in order to try to influence them to come onto our side. I keep saying again, even though I haven't mentioned it before, but I'm less, even though there is a bit of an echo chamber and a lot of pro-Israel people love Israellycool, and there is a lot to... a lot of benefit to even being an echo chamber, because I think the majority of pro-Israel advocates are echo chambers. And there is some worth to being an echo chamber in terms of giving people on our side information and tools and resources. And even the koach, being a cheerleader, especially at this time where we're all depressed and going through what we're going through as Am Yisrael, there is some worth to it. But personally speaking, I'm more interested in trying to get people who aren't necessarily pro-Israel to become more pro-Israel with all these techniques that I've developed basically through trial and error and making a bunch of mistakes over the course of the 22 years I've been doing it.
So how big is your audience and kind of what's the demographic?
Yeah, how big is my... I don't like always talking about, follower numbers and this, because I think as I was alluding to, it's misleading. Because most of it, and most people in our space, it's an echo chamber, not everyone, but for the most part. So, but in terms of the website, people come to the website, something like 10,000 people a day. It could be more, it could be a bit less. If things go viral, it can be way more. It could be 50, 60,000 people. And, on the social media channels, X has probably about 43,000 followers. That's on the higher end. Facebook maybe 22,000, something like that. And, Instagram just starting out. So that's like maybe only 4,500. And TikTok maybe 1,500. So I don't really pay too much attention to the numbers. It's more about the impact. And there could be a correlation between impact and numbers.
How do you measure that?
It's a good question. You can't really measure it except in terms of real life examples, if I can put it that way. So I can give some examples for you. Impact is when I expose some anti-Semites or terror supporters and they lose their job. That's happened a lot. And this is before Canary Mission, this is before Stop Anti-Semitism. I'm rattling off some names of organizations bigger than Israellycool now, that their whole focus is to expose these people. But Israellycool, I'd like to believe, I believe that I pioneered this approach, but I do it in a very different way, because they do it with a very straight bat, as it were, very serious and very, matter of fact. Here's the facts, anti-Semite, get them fired. They've got a whole approach and it's very effective. But I've always wanted to use humor with Israellycool. It's been very important to me, the tone. It's not just about the substance, but it's the form. And humor works a lot, and sarcasm, and it works in terms of attracting people to the websites and to our side, but it also works in terms of driving the anti-Semites and terror supporters crazy. If you mock them, you're kind of defanging them. So it's not just a matter of exposing them and getting them into trouble at work or whatever, which I like to do, but it's also mocking them. And I find that they really react in a terrible way. And getting back to something you said before, it's not for the faint of heart. You have to be in the firing line, and I put myself in the firing line because I proactively attack these people, and not just attack them, but mock them and deride them and expose them. I get a lot of pushback.
Of course.
So it's the death threats, but it's also, they were mocking my late wife and her illness. We had to deal with a lot of that stuff, but you kind of sign up for it when you decide to take on this battle. And I've developed a very thick skin. That doesn't bother me. And in fact, when they do that, I kind of go, okay, great, I'm going to use this against them. Because their own words and actions are one of our best weapons. You hoist them on their own petard. And I'm actually not about blocking these accounts. I don't like when people block some of these accounts, because then I lose a whole bunch of material.
Right. I was speaking with Hillel Fuld last week, and he was saying he didn't use exactly these words, but I said to him, you're like an energy monster over here. You feed on the hate. It was like when he also obviously gets plenty of these death threats and abusive mails and messages and whatever, and his go-to line is, "Thank you, sweetie. I've just donated to the IDF in your name, and the people of Israel, thank you for your contribution." So it's just like
you got to drive it in a bit. That's exactly right. Yeah.
I want to ask a provocative question over here.
Go ahead.
The doxxing. Yes. Because doxxing is something that people scream about, when for example, what's her name, Chaya Raichik, she was just libs of TikTok, and she kept a low profile, and I believe you also used to.
I got doxxed.
Right. So
which was one of the best things to happen to me, by the way.
Yeah. Why was it good for you?
Because I was Aussie Dave back then, and I was limited. I didn't post videos of myself. I was limited in what I could do, and I think the credibility that the website could have. Because as an anonymous person, whether you like it or not, you have less credibility. You do. People want to see a face, even though people were relating, and I had my voice. I did podcast back in the day, which I've given up since then, but would hopefully like to get back into. So it was sort of like a blessing in disguise. Although at the time, it was very upsetting at the time, because it was a guy called Richard Silverstein, a very self-hating Jew, terrible person. And we had this going on for a long time. And he, actually, I'll tell you a quick story about this. I wanted to prove, this guy was always, and still, posts untruths, and he kind of claims he's a fact checker and he's got credibility, but he never fact checks. And so I thought I'd set up a sting operation. And what I did was I got a friend to write an email under a fake name and say, "We found out who Aussie Dave is," because he always wanted to find out my identity. He had no way of doing that. And what I did is I set up this Facebook account, which was clearly fake, and had a picture of a famous basketball player in Israel. And the name was, I think, David Loeb. He knew I was David, and maybe with the L. So I gave another one, and there was a bunch of Easter eggs there that was fake. And then the person, I had a friend write him and say, "Listen, I found him," and it's like he made a mistake. And what I'd done was I'd posted a screenshot on my blog, and it showed the Facebook account at the bottom, the profile. I'd sort of made out like I'd made a big mistake. I set up this whole sting operation with the whole proof, and I wanted him to come and say, "It's David Loeb," and do that with the express goal of showing that this guy, you cannot be trusted.
Yeah.
He's completely sloppy. He would just go ahead, and sure enough, it worked, a treat.
Oh, wow.
And I did that, and he hated that. But what happened was one of his followers then was able to find my true identity, because when I first set up the website, I didn't mask the domain. So the details of the registration with my full name were there if you looked hard enough. So that's how I got doxxed. And he even said where I lived at the time, which happens to be in the same city where we're now sitting.
Yeah.
I don't live anymore, and I don't really publicize where I live because of the death threats and everything.
Don't blame you.
So, but not here. I mean, in Israel, but not in this town. Or maybe I do. And so it was scary at the time. And then a lot of people tried to get me fired from my job because he found out where I worked and made up a whole bunch of lies about me. Like I'm hacking accounts and I'm doing this and I've had so many, I joke about it. I joke a lot because Israellycool, sometimes I feel a bit Israellycool is not so appreciated within the pro-Israel world. The government has never really, I don't get invited to any of these ceremonies. They're handing out, merit awards.
I want to get back to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. That's okay. I'm being a bit facetious because I don't believe in that. But what I'm saying is sort of indicative that the government doesn't. There's definitely no funding, by the way. Although the bad guys think we're heavily funded, which is a compliment. And also the bad guys think that I'm this Dr. Evil type that doxes, hacks. Like, it's amazing what they believe I'm capable of. And it's sort of like that, I don't know if you know that joke about the two guys on the bench during Nazi Germany, and the guy's reading the Stürmer, and he said, why are you reading that? He's like, well, when I read the Jewish press, it's all doom and gloom, they're trying to kill us and anti-Semitism. And when I read the Nazi papers, we're trying to take over, we own all the banks, we own all the television. Yeah. It's kind of good news. Like it kind of makes me feel better, and I kind of feel that way when I look at the bad guys and all the claims against Israellycool and myself and what I'm capable of and all the things I've apparently done, which I haven't. Kind of makes me feel appreciated in a kind of weird way. Like I'm doing my job because I'm getting to them. I'm getting inside their head. It's psychological warfare, by the way.
Right.
It's all psychological warfare.
You're living rent free up there.
Yeah.
But getting back to the concept of doxing, like. We get upset when the bad guys dox us, but we're also doxing them.
Well, how do you define doxing?
Okay, so that's what I wanted to get down to. Like when you find somebody and identify their personal details and then start like contacting their employer and their social groups and whatever and shaming them publicly.
Yeah.
That's how I mean, without even getting into sort of Israel topics, it was like doxing was the favorite tool of the extreme left in places like America, where if somebody would make a comment online like, I think there are actually only two sexes, then like they would pile onto them and send messages to whoever, like I that happened to me. Like I made one blog post. I used to have a blog. It was never really a very high readership blog, but I used to occasionally make little political posts, and somebody attempted to dox me, and I was like, what the heck? I was just like, I was mocking some sort of woke crap that was and I was I made this sort of parody skit of like I was mocking the fact that that Microsoft had decided that their, if I don't know if you know the Git product, but like you've got different branches on the product, and your main branch is called master. So that's the master branch, and you have feature branches and bug branches and whatever. There's a whole flow to get your code back into the master branch. And then somebody said, the word master is triggering. And they said, okay, we're officially renaming it to the main branch. Like the whole programming world is like looking and say, what the heck? It's been called master forever. Nobody's ever taken offense. Find like one actual person who was anyway. So whatever. I wrote this blog post to try and just like taking the mickey out of this whole situation. And somebody found me and like and tried to dox me with Microsoft. like I didn't work for Microsoft even. I was working for a little startup at the time, and we were using Microsoft products.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who was like a senior manager at Microsoft, and this person tried to dox me with my friend. I don't know how they tracked this whole thing, and I said to my friend, like, what is this? And he says, I have no idea. It's ridiculous. But coming back to the question of, like, when is it ethical to dox someone and when is it not?
Right. Well, first of all, we have to define doxing. So in terms of what I do, okay, so from my point of view, doxing is when you reveal the identity of someone who's anonymous and you publish online their details, their personal details, okay? Like what Silverstein did to me, right? So I was Aussie Dave. I didn't want to be known by my name, and because of the subject matter and other reasons. And he somehow had to dig somewhere and find out my name and even where I lived, and that's doxing, okay? What I do with anti-Semites, for instance, is I find posts in their own name and public accounts, so it's not hacking or anything like that.
Right.
It's a public post on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, and I draw attention to it. And,
right, so you're just amplifying for them.
I'm amplifying all the public details about this person and where they work, or that's where they... I'll know where they work, or people will know where they work when it's publicly available on LinkedIn, like they themselves have published that. So it's just, it's collecting publicly available information. And so from my point of view, that isn't doxing. So there might be people who would argue somehow that is, but it's also with the express purpose of shining a light on bad actors. We're not talking about like people that disagree with you. Let's be clear. In your case, it's people that disagree with your political outlet. You didn't do anything wrong. As far as I'm concerned, it is ethical, this is my view, to shine a light on people who support terror and anti-Semites, Jew hate, and incite hatred of Jewish people. By the way, I do not dox, as I said, but I do not even do what I just told you, whatever you want to call that, expose the information, publicly available information, or shine a light on these posts of people who are just anti-Israel. Do you know what I mean? I have a higher bar than some of these organizations like Stop Anti-Semitism and Canary Mission, who, by the way, I respect. These are what they're doing. But I just have a higher bar for what I'm going to shine a light on. It has to be more egregious in my mind. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Like Stop Anti-Semitism, for instance, they had this Anti-Semite of the Year award, which I disagreed with having such an award for a number of reasons, right? One reason being that the people who were exposed were proud of it. Candace Owens won and she was gloating about it. It doesn't do anything, and it's a kind of a gamifying something very serious as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, it's okay if you're going to mock them.
It probably annoyed the hell out of Andrew Tate.
Okay, I guess, yeah. But
so what do you mean? Candace hates Jews more than
you know who the top three was? Candace. I can't remember all the top three, but one of them was Greta Thunberg. You know, this...
yeah, sure.
Now, I don't agree. You can't put her on the same level as Candace Owens. Candace Owens is an intellectual, and she's using her powers of thought and intellect for bad. And she's gone down this rabbit hole. I don't know how it happened. And she's promoting
she
absolute,
actually quite a credible
blatant.
voice.
She used to be pro-Israel. Yeah. She came to Israel for the moving of the embassy, the U.S. embassy. She was pro-Israel, but she's gone down this anti-Semitic rabbit hole, and very, I think, Christian anti-Semitism based. But she's always saying Christ is king and these sorts of things. So, but Greta Thunberg is a silly kid. And she's very anti-Israel. And she had once an octopus toy, fluffy toy. I don't believe. I think that was a coincidence. But she's not like this. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of insulting to put her on the same level of anti-Semitism. And I kind of feel it undermines our cause when people do things like that. So I disagreed with that. So what I'm trying to say is that the people and the posts that I expose are really, beyond a reasonable doubt, anti-Semitic. Because again, who's my target audience? It's people who aren't necessarily on our side. I want the average layperson, I was about to say layman, but I don't want to get cancelled. The average layperson out there to look and go, oh my God, that is anti-Semitic. You know, we're talking about caricatures of the big noses, we're talking about the tropes. I think it is incumbent on us to fight back against this. And one of the most effective tools is what I just described. Take their public posts and shine a light on them. They publicized them, they wanted them to be read. So that's not, as far as I'm concerned, doxing. Now, in Australia now, there's this whole, since this nurses video, this very disturbing nurses video, I've taken upon myself to start exposing more anti-Semites and terror-supporting doctors. And they don't like it, and so maybe this is where your question's coming from, I'm not sure, but they're trying to get me arrested in Australia now for doxing.
Really?
They're saying that I'm doxing them, even though I just described to you what I don't believe is doxing. Yeah. I'm not going to stop doing it however you define it, because we're talking about people's Jewish patients' lives potentially at stake. Maybe not, but I'm not willing to take a 1% chance.
What's your opinion of that nurse's case? I mean, do you think that they actually killed people, or do you think they were just kind of flexing?
I thought they were just flexing, which is bad in itself, right? Yeah. It's bad. It's terrible. It's beyond.
Yeah, that's the sort of stuff that you don't joke about.
Yeah. But they did find a vial of morphine in the guy's locker, so all of a sudden I'm thinking, oh crap, maybe something did happen. I didn't initially think...
Is there a legit reason why somebody would have some morphine in their locker?
I wouldn't think... Is this a rhetorical question?
No, I don't know. I genuinely
maybe
don't
he's
know.
shooting it up
if
himself,
you're a nurse,
or it's for himself, or his friends. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, it's illegal. Now, it could be... The worst case scenario is he was using it on patients and killing patients. Jewish, Israeli, Zionist patients. I shuddered to think.
Yeah.
But when I initially heard it, I thought it was a flex, but still, they cannot be working in the medical profession at all. You can't do that.
Yeah.
And I saw people who really... There was a former Australian diplomat who was saying it was a setup. And he didn't understand... The guy picked them, he hand-picked them, the Israeli, Max... Wi-Fi, whatever. Yeah. But the name of the app it's something called Chat Roulette. Chat Roulette?
Yeah.
By its name, you can tell how it works. Yes. It's a random... and I've seen these apps before. There's one called Omega or Mage or something like that, where basically you randomly connect with people across the world. Mm-hmm. I think you can set the parameters with countries. I'm not sure. I haven't really used it. And then you randomly connect. So it was a random kind of encounter. And he happened to... He records his encounters. I'm guessing this Max influencer guy in Israel does want to meet up with anti-Israel people and have those discussions and see what happens.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make it a setup. He didn't put a gun to their head.
No.
He released the full video. They just came out with their hate.
But what's more disturbing than the nurses themselves is the reaction of the Muslim community in Australia.
Which is not unexpected. So you have to distinguish between what's disturbing and what's not surprising. So things are always disturbing no matter how unsurprising they are. I'm disturbed, but I'm not surprised. Because if you're following the Muslim organisations in Australia, as I do, it's not surprising. They're on the wrong side of the history. And I wasn't surprised by the reaction.
Well, that's one of the things about our situation in the world today is that let's say that if it's true that it's only a very small fraction of Muslims who really are terrorists and jihadis and want to kill all the infidel and whatever, the problem is the quiet ones and the ones who maybe support, maybe don't, but aren't prepared to stick their necks out and say this is wrong.
Yeah.
Which means that the voices of, if there are any voices of Muslims who are anti-terror, who are pro-coexistence, who are pro, just getting along with everyone in the world, you never hear from them.
I mean, you hear from some. I don't want to say you never hear from them. I've got friends. I even have a guy, a Palestinian Arab, who sometimes writes for Israellycool. And he's very
the people like Nas as well, and
but there's no critical mass, and you can see that as a microcosm of Gaza, right? Because I'm sure there are innocents in Gaza. I'm not one of the people that says they're all evil, but you don't hear from them. You don't hear them. Why wasn't there one hostage?
Not one.
Saved, like in the Holocaust, there were at least some righteous Gentiles.
A $5 million bounty.
Yeah, and it still didn't work. Now, people voted Hamas in. They have a certain amount of culpability for that. And again, I don't think every single Gazan, and I'm sure there are some that hate what's going on and they hate Hamas. We've seen videos.
Yeah.
But when push came to shove, no one stood up.
And if they hate Hamas, it's just because they think that Hamas was stupid about the way they did things. They don't think it was actually morally wrong to do what they did on October.
Yeah, I would say the majority. I mean, from what I understand, the majority don't think it was morally wrong. But again, I can't speak for each and every one. There are good people everywhere. But again, you can only go by what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that the majority of Gaza is on Team Hamas. It seems to me, without taking a census or a poll. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's a majority or a little bit less than a majority. There aren't enough people, and there certainly weren't anyone to stop what happened, or to try to rescue the hostages or give intel on where the hostages were. So, what conclusions can we come to?
Yeah, that's a difficult call. Do you ever see your role as an Israel advocate as also sort of trying to shift Israeli opinion about like what? Because it's not just about people outside of Israel who are trying to, who are not really sure about this whole thing. They just see that there's a lot of noise about it in the media, and the BBC keeps saying genocide, and like, is it actually like, are these Israelis doing bad things to the Palestinians? And you're trying to get in there and say, listen, here's the whole story. So that is one aspect, but also within Israel, we also have, unfortunately, we have divisions among ourselves, and that's, I guess, is a kind of a natural thing that you're never going to have everyone having the same opinion. But there's a lot of what Hillel called it Bibi derangement syndrome, which is which manifests in ways like, for example, the fact that people at the beginning of the war were like, they were screaming Bibi out, and whatever didn't work, and then Bibi fires his defense minister Gallant, and they say, how can you fire a defense minister in the middle of the... And it's like, hello, just a second. You're the same people who at the beginning of the war were saying fire the prime minister, and that was okay, but firing the defense minister is not okay. And second example was like an informal poll of people who were like anti-Bibi and say, like, if you had a choice between getting all the hostages out tomorrow or removing Bibi from the prime minister's seat tomorrow, which would you take? And like a not insignificant number of people chose they'd rather remove Bibi than get back all the hostages. Like, do you ever get involved in the internal Israeli stuff?
Simply, I don't. It's a good question. I don't. And that's because of my strategy, my goals with the websites. Because I think if you want to get beyond the echo chamber, it's not a good practice to get involved in the internal Israeli politics. In fact, any sort of politics. I try to stay quite apolitical now. That's not to say that I wouldn't criticize certain actions but that could be on both sides of the political spectrum. I was very vocal in praising certain things that Trump did, and when they were calling him Hitler, I came out against that. But it's not really a focus for the website. So I think there could be a byproduct that Israelis can read many of the things on Israellycool and come to their own conclusions in terms of certain policies that I might agree or disagree with. But I try to stay out of internal Israeli politics where possible. And that's not to say, again, going back to what I was saying before, like there are different types of Israel advocates. And those who want to energize, or they're more about, let's say, saying what's on their mind, and that's fine. Coming out with their authentic voice. I'm not criticizing that. That's just not my personal kind of tactic. In terms of the goals that I'm trying to achieve, in terms of the strategy.
Right.
It just wouldn't work for what I'm trying to achieve. I don't like airing dirty laundry.
Yeah,
I don't like... So there's a lot of things I don't like about Israeli society, internal problems that we have, and, we could talk off camera about certain things.
Yeah.
But I don't talk about it. I try not to talk about it too much. The only times I guess I've criticized advocates, I have done that before, and I have a lot of gripes with the world of Israel advocacy, and people who know me know about them. Sometimes I maybe touch on them a bit, but there have been times where I've kind of spoken out where I thought that not speaking out could cause a lot of damage. I can give you an example of this without mentioning names. There was another podcast where people, I was about to say guys, but again, trying to be politically correct. They were talking about they wanted to wipe Gaza, we should wipe Gaza off the map. Now, whether or not you believe that, and that's, the anger in the moment of saying that, whether or not that's something you should be saying publicly. But they said it publicly, and then the other side, it was all over Twitter and X, everywhere.
Yeah.
And they were using it. The bad actors, the bad guys, the other side were trying to show how we're all genocidal maniacs.
Yeah.
And I felt in that moment, although on one hand people were saying psychological warfare, you shouldn't really have infighting, I made a call in that moment to speak out. I did a whole post against it, saying, listen, these guys don't represent us. They're obviously speaking maybe in anger, frustration, whatever, but what I always try to do with Israellycool is turn it against the other side. So it's not about defense, it's about pushing offense. Defense, for instance, is when there are libels and you just answer the libel and that's it.
Yeah.
You keep, and I answer a lot of libels. I have a whole section on the website debunking libels. And these libels keep coming up again and again. People can use the post that I've published. But being on the offense is when you say, listen, you have a pattern of lying about Israel or a pattern of doing this or that. And you push against them and then you also expose them for that. So that's kind of the difference between defense and really being offensive, but without being offensive.
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean. So similarly here, I pushed back against them saying, listen, these people, they always take the views of some Israelis and they try to paint us all with the same brush. You don't just like these guys maybe were painting in frustration, painting all Gazans with the same brush. You're doing exactly the same thing, you know what I mean? So you're, again, trying to use that in that moment to try to make a point against them. And, I had some fellow advocates that didn't like that I criticised them. Privately we messaged. And it's a legitimate conversation to have. It wasn't like a clear-cut thing for me, but I just kind of felt in that moment I had to push back because of what I saw was the damage that was being done to our side. So for those reasons, I don't like to air our dirty laundry. Yeah. Unless maybe in a certain particular situation, I kind of feel like it's a judgment call.
I think that's an important thing. So you have to be able to call balls and strikes. Yeah. And
Good point.
You lose credibility if we're always good and they're always bad. And
True. Yeah. Exactly. No. Yeah. That's important because you have to be an authentic voice. Mm-hmm. And if you're just saying what's on your mind all the time and you might believe it's true and maybe it is objectively true, but that's it, then that's okay, that's fine. That's your Israel advocacy. And again, you can get a lot of people agreeing with you and it feels good and you're cheerleading and you're providing information and all these things have merit. Just in my personal experience and in terms of what I'm trying to achieve with Israellycool, that's not at all what I'm trying to do. Yeah.
So now, I mean, one of the things that Israel, the state of Israel has been, I think, rightly criticized for is not really taking the Hasbara battle seriously and not really investing resources. There's that. I think they've kind of belatedly come to the party and actually decided to assign some budget to to all this kind of advocacy stuff. And you were alluding to this earlier, and I want to come back to this now. So you were kind of left out in the cold.
Yeah, look, it's not. I'm going to say a few things now. It's not sour grapes, okay? It might come across as sour grapes, but I'm trying to make a point. I kind of understand the way things work. So the Israeli government has come quite late to the party. There has been some efforts to try to have communication channels and learn. Years ago, I think they were kind of more modest. They went from this top-down approach where we are the best at everything and you guys should follow our lead kind of approach, to understanding that there were advocates on the ground with way more experience, way more effective, with no budget, okay? Yeah. And so they were trying to maybe learn from them a bit, let's put it that way, but there was still no budget. Yeah. Now, at least in my case, maybe there were other advocates out there that were getting paid, I don't know. Certainly not the narrative of the anti-Israel side where we're all paid Zionist trolls. Yeah. Definitely not. Certainly not in my case. And I always joke, I would love that to be true. I would love to be a paid Zionist troll. I'd make no and by the way, if I am, and I would love to get a grant right? If there's a way to get a grant, I would love to get a grant because, Israellycool needs to survive and do this work.
Yeah.
But that hasn't happened. And it certainly wouldn't change the approach, meaning I would never, and this also goes with donors, I wouldn't change things, that's kind of like sometimes could be a dilemma. If you get too big, and I don't have that problem, but sometimes when an organization gets too big, they lose their effectiveness or maybe their edge that they once had because they're trying to placate donors. You have big donors and they don't like when you do that. And maybe, I don't want to get in that situation, just to make that clear. I want to always retain the authentic voice of Israellycool and the approach, which I think is really, really effective, just from experience. So, and the same would be if we were to get government funding, but we don't have government funding. Right. Now, from my understanding, so again, this is just from my understanding, there is a budget, but it's not clear how that budget's being used, how they're deciding what the process is. But for what I understand, the Israeli government did bring out some of these Instagram influencers to Israel, and they brought them, I think, to the Keren Shalom crossing, and they did a bunch of stuff. Now, if that's true, right? Because they were all posting the same things at once. And I think that some of them are even saying, yeah, we got brought out by the Israeli government. Now that is to me a very ineffective way to use government funds. So first of all,
who are these people?
I don't need to mention names, but they're mostly younger people who are on Instagram. This whole influencer thing, right? Where I hate the term influencer because I think every human has the ability to influence. It's just, people with large Instagram followings, relatively large, and somehow they're called influencers because they're more
it's a scale.
Influential. But as I've mentioned, most of them, not all of them, most of them are echo chamber people. They've got a lot of people on our side following them. Not all of them. There are some who got into Israel advocacy, like there's one, I'll mention the name because this is a complimentary thing. Montana Tucker, she thinks she's like a dancer and singer. And she has millions of followers, most of whom had nothing to do with Israel, because they appreciated her talents. Right. But she segued into more Israel advocacy. I think it was after October the 7th, I'm not 100% sure. And, Baruch Hashem and Kol HaKavod to her, props, she's using this platform of what I assume are mostly not Israel advocates or supporters of Israel to spread the word. And she's probably lost a lot of followers, but a lot have remained. So that's effective as far as I'm concerned. That's beyond the echo chamber. But a lot of these other ones, I think, are coming from the Jewish world, and I'm guessing a lot of it.
The people who would be most effective in those areas are like people who had like their own following independently.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing any Instagram influencer that decides to focus more on Israel advocacy. Not at all. I think they deserve all the credit in the world. It's hard, and they're losing followers. I'm just now nuts and bolts about should the Israeli government be paying people just based on their follower number without really understanding
what the quality.
Exactly. And not only that, just think about what they were doing. First of all, the Israeli government announces every time they have one of these things, they announce it. They announce, we're going to put in... that's stupid. I think that's stupid to announce it. Keep it on the down low. Because the other side will use that to say we're paid trolls, right?
Right.
And we're not all paid trolls. Maybe some are paid a little bit. But do you know what I mean? It undermines the independence that really exists. So it's like an own goal, right? That's the first own goal. The second own goal is to spend the money on bringing them out. If they're so pro-Israel, which they are, they'll pay for their own ticket. There are other ways to use that money. Thirdly, they all brought them, the Israeli government apparently brought them, and they're all posting videos with their own shtick or their own nuance or their own kind of theme, but from the same places. So it looks like a propaganda jaunt.
Yeah.
Again, there has to be more thought put into this. I believe my proposal, and it's not so self-serving, maybe there's a bit of self-serving, but I'm trying to be objective, is to find really effective advocacy and put some strategic money into those advocates or the advocacy organizations. But it has to be very different kind of advocacy. So I want to give a shout out now to an example, a friend of mine who runs a thing called Athletes for Israel, Project Max. His name is Eric Rubin. You might not have heard of him. He's a quiet achiever. He's someone that deserves a lot of government funding. Hi, Eric, if you're watching this. Maybe I'll send you the link. He brings out athletes because he works in the NBA. and other sporting organizations in the financial field. So he made connections with athletes.
Right.
Now he brings these athletes out to Israel, and they're not necessarily, religious Christians. They could just be regular athletes. And they come here and they really have a meaningful experience, and it's not a propaganda trip. Like, they come, they're not necessarily pro-Israel, but they see, they learn about Israel. They visit, the Druze village that, lost the kids that were bombed, like all these sorts of things. And they come to the conclusion that, on their own volition, they put out videos very different of their time in Israel. Now, their followers are all just followers, fans of the athletes. But think about how effective that is.
Yeah.
Now, I know he's not getting government funding.
Yeah.
I know it for a fact. He's a good friend of mine. That's one area you should put. The government should, help bring these athletes out and just let Eric and his organization do their thing. There shouldn't be a mandate. There shouldn't be telling them what to say. Like, none of that. That's not what it is.
Right.
So this is just one example. I could name some more, including Israellycool, by the way. But, that's an example where I think the government funding would be more effective. Identify areas and different kinds of strategies. Because see, the way that I see the world of Israel advocacy, it's like the Israeli army. It's a digital battlefield. But, in the Israeli army, you have different battalions. You have different, you have Golani, you have Givati. You also have the Tzayirot, the special forces.
Yeah.
The ones who go on the front lines more, dealing with anti-Semites and other things.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But they're all you need that whole army to work together.
Right.
It's not just one area and doing the same thing and putting money into people doing the same thing, and they're not even really all doing it effectively. That would be my unsolicited suggestion. No one's really listening to me in that regard. Maybe I can get an ear with someone from the Israeli government.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what is it that Israel has taken this so unseriously, and really not in terms of actual military strategy is we're the best of the best, and in terms of actually winning the hearts and minds, we're so bad at it
because they don't understand it, and a lot of people in the area don't understand it. They haven't been in it long enough. They've just come into it a lot, and they're working on enthusiasm and they're coming at it with the right intentions, and although not all, some people have gotten very caught up in it. Some of these influencers get very large followings and it gets to their head, and they try to I don't want to say they make a living, because obviously I think anyone should be able, if they want to become a full-time advocate, it's everyone's right to try to make a living of it in order that you're able to do that. But that should be the goal, but not to get rich out of it. And unfortunately we see some who are trying to get rich out of this. It really is a thing that's happening. I have inside knowledge on this. And, some who have a certain level of fame now, and they charge exorbitant rates for organizations, for speaking gigs and things like that. And I detest that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I detest that, because that money could go towards the IDF, it could go towards MADA, Hatzala.
I kind of get that feeling. There's one particular account on X, a very strong pro-Israel account, who's posts every 2 minutes. He's got something to say about whatever, but and he's got a massive following. But the one thing that just really gets up my nose about him is that he reposts things from other people without accreditation.
Oh, that happens a lot. That's another thing that's happening. There's a lot of plagiarism. Now, having said that, I want to distinguish between those who post a lot of things that they got elsewhere and they don't know the source, because there's a lot of WhatsApp groups. Yeah. So a video will be posted, you don't know it was posted and posted and posted. You can't necessarily track all the way back, or there isn't a way to know. But I've had instances where my work with a watermark has been ripped. The watermark was taken off deliberately, and it was an actual organization that did this. They put on their watermark, and there was a whole video actually to do with Roger Waters, and I had this whole video proving one of his lies, and they loved the video. They just didn't want it to come from Israellycool. And I called them out on it, and they blocked me on all channels. That's an egregious example.
Wow.
But it does happen a lot that people know where it comes from, but they're interested in their own, instead of retweeting, for instance, they want to try to upload the video again themselves and get the engagements, because they're now getting paid. If you have a premium account on X, you can get paid. The more views. Yes. So this incentivization, unfortunately, has this bad side effect, which is increasing the amount of people ripping other people's work.
Yeah.
And that drives me crazy. But again, not everyone that is... There are a lot of, let's say, accounts that do repost other people's work without realizing it. They just get some video from somewhere on WhatsApp.
This one is like so habitual.
Yeah, there are
like
a few.
Anytime I see that he's posted something, I mean, he'll post stuff from the Babylon Bee, and he'll cut off the heading that said the Babylon Bee, even though the subline it says by the Babylon Bee in little print.
That's terrible. No, but a lot of these people are getting money for it. Yeah. They're monetizing because they've got so many followers. Yeah, so I agree with you that I can't stand that. And it's a real problem. And I've spoken out against this in the past, and there's always those people that say, come on, man up, you're being petty, we're all on the same side. I'm sorry, yes, we are on the same side, but there's no excuse for stealing.
Yeah,
there's no excuse for that. And there are bad people on our side behaving badly.
Yeah,
and I try not to call them out unless it's quite serious.
Yeah. It's actually interesting. You just like triggered something in my memory, like a discussion I had with my wife a day or two ago. She said, like, she in her line of business, she sometimes like just really doesn't want to do business with other Jewish companies, because and particularly the from ones, unfortunately, it's like I'm sorry, it's a terrible kitrug, but it's like to say, because they treat it too much like family. We're all on the same side or whatever.
Yes.
Sorry, we didn't cut you the check. I'm really sorry.
It's a bit too relaxed sometimes.
Shabbos is coming. We'll send you the check next week, okay? And it's like, no, it's not okay. Like, we've got to pay our people as well. And like, you being all very relaxed is very nice, but we've also got obligations.
True.
And there's that sort of respect. You kind of think, this reminds me of like Rabbi Akiva and his 24,000 students who were so familiar with each other, and like, this is Rabbi Akiva who taught but his students somehow didn't get the memo, perhaps because they were a little bit too familiar with each other and didn't really...
True. Yeah. Now that could be part of it, but again, I think part of it is the money aspect, the tracing likes, clickbait. These are all problems, and it doesn't just affect Jewish and Israel advocates, but as a whole, you see many people. I see on X that they won't link to the report. They'll put a screenshot, and I know they're doing it because if they link, according to the algorithm, they'll get less views. X doesn't like when you have external links, apparently. So they'll deliberately put a screenshot, but without a link to the report. The people that came out
I
with
think
the report,
the proper way to do that, just for the record, is to, like, in your first post, you give the meat and potatoes of what's there, and put a screenshot, and the second comment you put the link.
So fair. So I think people. So there's different reasons for this, but it's been endemic for a long time, and I agree with you. It's a problem, and it does get on my goat as well.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of the larger accounts do this, and they get popular on the backs of the smaller accounts who are putting in the original work.
Yeah. So who is your favorite other Israel advocate that you just like really respect?
I think I just mentioned Eric.
Eric.
And one of the things I love about Eric, hi Eric, is he's just so modest. So I don't like when people get too big for their britches. And it's happened a lot. They get large followings and it becomes about them, and they get a bit cocky. I just don't like it. Maybe it's because I'm Australian and we see through BS. I just don't like it. So Eric's my favorite because he's so unassuming. He's modest. He's about the cause. He made Aliyah not that long ago, maybe a year or a little over a year ago. And he just jumps in and he wants to serve Klal Yisrael. And he's all about the love. He promotes other Israel advocates. And because what he's doing is so effective. So for me, he is my favorite other Israel advocate.
So if other listeners want to follow him, how can they find him online?
Oh, I don't remember the exact... it's Eric Rubin, ERICRUBIN, Project Max. Max. Athletes for Israel. If you Google those things, you'll somehow get to his social media accounts. Okay, and definitely support what he's doing. It's amazing. It's really amazing.
And what was your most viral post?
Ever?
Yeah.
I actually don't know that. What was the most viral post ever? I don't know in terms of views and things like that, but I can just tell you some interesting. I'll tell you some posts that, let's say, definitely got beyond the echo chamber. Yeah. No, so actually, this was in the video that I did about Roger Waters. So Roger Waters, a number of years ago, I think it was in 2015, as he always does when there's a musician that wants to perform in Israel, announces they're performing in Israel, he tries to get them to cancel. Right, yeah. And so that he tried that on Alan Parsons. And that was wrong, because Alan Parsons is very pro-Israel. He might even, I think, collaborate with Israeli musicians. Whatever, he's one of the good ones. He's a great musician as well. And so Roger put on Facebook and other social media a letter. He penned a letter to Alan Parsons telling him, please, Alan, or he might not have even said please. He was trying to guilt him into cancelling. So I wrote a post about that, and it was, I think, called "The Dark Side of the Moron," which, you know, low-hanging fruit, right? So that's the title.
Well played.
Yeah, it gets better though, because Alan Parsons, as a rebuttal to Roger Waters, so he posts on his social media publicly a link to the Israellycool post, "The Dark Side of the Moron." Yeah. So not only is he linking to an Israellycool post, but it's called "The Dark Side of the Moron." And this gives me so much nachos.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the most viral, but like, by gee, that's one of the funnest ones I've had.
That's very cool.
And by the way, just as a sort of a prologue to that, or epilogue, the postscript.
But yeah, epilogue.
Epilogue. Yeah, you're the author. You're the bookseller. David Gilmour, I think he only follows about 70 odd accounts. 70 accounts. They could all be odd, I don't know. On X, and Israellycool is one of them. So I'm proud of that. And there's no doubt. David Gilmour's also Pink
Floyd, right? David Gilmour's from Pink Floyd?
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah, I meant that.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get on with Roger Waters, and it was his wife that called him anti-Semitic to the core, and David Gilmour, like, they've got a very known rivalry.
Okay.
And he has endorsed the view that Roger Waters is actually anti-Semitic. That his wife, Polly, David Gilmour's wife, Polly Sampson, tweeted once, and there was this whole feud, re-erupted. Anyway, I'm proud of the fact that he follows Israellycool, and there's no doubt he does it for the anti-Roger Waters stuff, and probably nothing else. But you know what? That's okay. That's okay with me.
Yeah. I had the experience once of going like completely viral when I totally didn't expect it.
Okay, what happened?
So this was in what year was it? 20. When was it that those 3 boys were kidnapped in the Gush? 2014 or something.
It's around then, I think.
Yeah,
or 16 maybe.
Somewhere around there. I don't remember what year it was. And it was like, you know, the whole of Israel was just like, that's like just 1 degree below October 8th in terms of like unity of purpose and clarity and whatever. And I was so frustrated with what I saw as the government's like really weak-kneed response to this whole thing. And I wrote on my blog a speech given by Netanyahu, right? And I wrote a speech for him in which he thanked Hamas for unifying Israel as never before, and explaining to them that, you know, basically you're gonna, you know, give these boys back, or we're going to, you know, our troops are now massing at the northern border of Gaza, and we're going to like move down Gaza like a toothpaste tube and squeeze, and up until the moment when you surrender, that's where we draw our border again, and you will never again contaminate this land with your presence and whatever. This was we're talking about we're talking about 10 years ago or more, and it was like this rousing thing. I mean, I can write nicely when I want to. You know, it was a powerful speech that you could imagine, like people really getting into. And I put this on my blog, but it had a postscript, and then I woke up and it had all been a dream. Okay. Somebody went and copy-pasted the entire speech
Without your name?
Without my name, and without the postscript, and then I worked it was all a dream, and stuck it into WhatsApp. Now, I can tell you exactly what year it was. I was going to, because I went to, it was the day before, I posted this the day before I flew to London for my nephew's bar mitzvah. Okay, so it was 2014. Okay, so I land in London and wake up the next morning and I see a WhatsApp from my wife. And there is the speech that I've written from Netanyahu, and my wife has sent this to me. I think, oh my gosh, she saw this on my blog, and now she's upset with me because I'm making, I'm causing waves again. This is like one of her regular complaints is that I shoot my mouth off about politics and draw attention to us and whatever. And I said, what? I said, yeah, this is from my blog. Is there an issue with it? And she said, no, this is the speech that Netanyahu gave. And I said, no, it's not.
It's
I wrote this.
That's hilarious.
And she said, no, I got this from the WhatsApp group, the women's chat group, whatever.
It made its way around the world, huh?
It had gone everywhere, and it had gone through South Africa and America and Australia and whatever. It was everywhere, and all the people were like reposting this thing as like, this is the speech that Netanyahu gave, and I said, I've done it. I've gone viral, and I had no intention of doing it.
Maybe he should have given the speech just after the fact.
And after this happened again, and I knew that I've got the formula over here. Yeah. There was another dust up with Hamas a couple years later, and I thought, you know what?
Here we go again.
Here we go again. I took basically the same speech and tweaked a couple of other things for circumstances and just dropped it into a WhatsApp group and say in two separate messages. One saying "meanwhile in a parallel universe," and then comes the rest of the message. So I can't be accused of intentionally spreading fake news.
Yeah.
And so I think that's exactly the same thing happened again. It just went crazy. Fast forward now to October 8th, 2023, and I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, yeah, I'm gonna do this. And I feel like I can't actually. This is actually too big. This is actually too big for me to start screwing around with this now, because this actually is what they should be doing now. And I'm still so frustrated now that we didn't start right away with territorial threats, because Hamas doesn't care about human lives. They want more death. They want more, Rahman al-Islam, they want more Jews to die. They want more Arabs to die. Mm-hmm. They want more buildings to be blown up so that they can show the world,
it works for them,
genocide. Yeah. Because that's exactly what they want. The only thing that hurts them is loss of territory. So why the hell have we never taken this line? And I asked Hillel Full this question last week. And I said, why? And just, I don't know.
I don't know.
Why? What is it? Like we've now even up until last year you could have said, okay, we've got a hostile U.S. president and a hostile British prime minister, and about everyone other than Argentina is against us, But what's the excuse now? Why are we not playing this card?
Yeah, let's see now, right? Because after Trump's speech.
And that
we have to see. I don't know. I'm not one of these people that can guess what other people are thinking or why the government is doing something and not doing something. I don't know. I share your frustration, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's just wait and see what's happening. But you're right. We have a different US president now, and things might be very different. We just have to wait and see.
Yeah, would hope so. How do you see it playing out? I mean, if you had to.
I honestly, I couldn't tell you, to be honest. How do I see it playing out? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Things are so unpredictable. Nothing is certain in this sphere, and when you think something's going to happen, all of a sudden the very opposite could happen.
Yeah.
So that's just all I say is just to have your faith in God, because at the end of the day, He's pulling all the strings.
Yeah. Lev Malachim Biyad Hashem.
Yeah, and it's not man who's pulling the strings. It might look that way, but they're just tools. The leaders are just tools, and bad things happen, because of man. But ultimately, hopefully, good things will happen. But we just have to wait and see. I haven't really played in my mind what what is going to happen, what I think is going to happen. I've learned not to undertake that mental exercise because it could just drive you crazy. Crazier than everything is already driving us.
Yeah. I get
What do you
that.
think?
Yeah. Like you say, it's everything that we say is going to be a big kind of don't know, and one of the questions that's like that a lot of this hinges on is how deeply ingrained is the Oslo mindset in our leadership. This is I spoke with Moshe Feiglin a couple of weeks ago, and his firm opinion, and of course he's got his reasons for his opinions, is that the current political leadership of the country, as much as they may say they're right wing and say that they against two-state solution and whatever, but they can't go the full distance of saying Oslo was a mistake, and we never should have done it, and it's time to undo it. Mm-hmm. He draws it like a direct line between Oslo and October 7th. This is Oslo to disengagement to
yes.
October 7th. It's like, and
cause and effect.
And if you are so vested in it, and the fact is that even Netanyahu voted for disengagement right up until the end when it was too late. And when you've built your entire sort of political career around the fact that you're trying to pay at least lip service to if not literally a two-state solution, but at least some sort of limited autonomy, but you're not prepared to take the necessary steps to ensure that Israel actually survives as a Jewish state.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if, and this is, putting that together with what I was saying earlier of how I don't understand why we haven't used land as leverage. It ties in, maybe this is not the answer, but it would explain it if you're too afraid to take over the land again, because that now is a direct repudiation of Oslo. And it's just too much to say, okay, we're now taking back this land and never again giving it back to any kind of Palestinian authority. And now it's like what Feiglin was talking about already decades ago of paying people to immigrate voluntarily. Yeah. That was considered like completely crazy, and you can't say that anymore, and it was completely outside the Overton window. And in one fell swoop, Trump just suddenly broke the Overton window and said, well, this is actually the plan.
Yeah.
And everyone can now scream about it and say, no, we can't do that, but now at least we're talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. There's been a paradigm shift in thinking.
Yeah.
And that's why, things are very interesting. I see a lot of misinformation about what Trump had said. So the way that I read it is that he wasn't talking about expelling anyone, but it was going to be a voluntary. That's the way I would read it. Mm-hmm. And there's already, if you look at some of the polls from Gaza, if they're to be believed, that there's a lot of people that would have wanted to have left Gaza even before October the 7th. And, at the end of the day, the way I see it is a lot of the regular people, it's about, economics and resources. That's most conflicts in the world around that, unless it's a religious ideology.
How much have we spent on Iron Dome? If you take all the money that we spent on Iron Dome and on Rahman al-Islam, all of the soldiers who've fallen in battle in Gaza, and all of the defense stuff that we've spent billions and billions of dollars trying to put up fences in the air, to try and protect ourselves from these savages.
Yeah. After we disengaged.
It's mad.
But what I mean is, from their point of view, if there's incentivization for them to live a good life elsewhere, I think a lot of them would take that.
Right.
They're sick to death of it.
So take those billions of dollars.
So the ones who want to leave, they should be allowed to leave, and I believe that the Arab state should take them in. I mean, when we had the nascent Jewish state, it took in all the refugees from the Muslim lands who had to flee or were, expelled. Yeah. The Jews, right? Yeah. They're not talking. No one talks about that, or the world as a whole doesn't talk about those refugees. They talk about the so-called Palestinian refugees, the 700 or so thousand, who, by the way, didn't all, they weren't all expelled. Most of them weren't. There were some conflagrations where maybe some of them were expelled. They were, involved in the fighting or whatnot. But there were a lot of people that just fled with either being scared in war, or they were promised by the Arab Legion that they were going to be able to return after they destroyed us. So this is history that many people don't, the TikTok educated don't bother to learn, or they're not exposed to. And, bad things happen in war, and you don't, in this conflict, it seems that the losers always tend to think that they have a right to win all the territory.
Right.
It's this weird situation. That's not the way war works. You start with us, we hand your asses back to you on a platter. You're going to have to live with that, and you're going to have less. And that hasn't happened,
and yet
because we keep giving over more.
We never enforce it. We always come out, even though, technically we've come out having won, and we still negotiate terms as if we lost.
And it's really bad, because it involves more loss of life on both sides eventually, because it promotes more war. It encourages more war. It encourages things like October the 7th.
Yeah.
We're in the Middle East. This isn't a Western mentality. In this neck of the woods, strength is the language. You have to show strength. And the West don't get that. And as a result, they look to appeasement. But appeasement is the worst thing that you can do. Yes. I think Donald Trump actually gets it, but he's coming more from a savvy negotiator point of view. Maybe he does understand the Middle East mentality as well. But because he's a very savvy negotiator, he brings that to the table. And that's why he can just sort of, he's the guy that comes to the table and just upends the chessboard.
Did you see his press conference with King Abdullah?
I saw the one where King Abdullah was blinking
and squirming.
I love that.
Oh, that was
great.
beautiful.
Worth the price of admission. I did see that. He was blinking all of a sudden. He was like,
stammering, couldn't put a coherent sentence together.
But Jordan, is mostly Palestinian. That should be the Palestinian state. If there is to be a Palestinian state, there never was a Palestinian state in history, as we know.
And Abdullah himself is in a terrible situation, because he's not a Palestinian. He's a Hashemite.
And his father went again. We had Black September in Jordan in the early 70s. They fought a war against the PLO. So this is all history that the people nowadays is mouthing off in the town square. They don't understand. So it behooves everyone to learn their history and understand, and not concede certain points which aren't true. And one of the things is that the Arab states should take in they call them refugees, right? This was another interesting thing about what what I'm going to get at. Right?
Go say it.
They were claiming after Trump said that they were interviewing all these Palestinian Arabs in Gaza. This is our land, this is our home. You can't take us away. But the ones in Gaza have always said they're refugees.
Yeah.
So they're saying that Gaza's their home, but if you're a refugee, you're living in a place that isn't your home. They're claiming that all of Israel, inside Israel is their home, and so they're only in Gaza as a refugee. But now they're claiming, no, Gaza is our home. So they want their cake and they eat it. And this is a microcosm of the entire conflict. They want their cake and they want to eat it too.
Well, the Irish as well.
Don't get me started on the Irish, okay? Don't get me started on the Irish. The worst anti-Semites on the planet right now, I think, besides the Palestinian Arabs. Don't get me started on them.
But it was a nice little thing where they broadened the definition of genocide so that they can nail Israel as committing genocide. And say, okay, if we're committing genocide, then why don't you take all the refugees, save them from us?
And that's the thing. All these so-called supporters of the Palestinians, they don't love the Palestinian Arabs.
They just hate us.
They hate us. So they're just like a blunt-edged tool to bludgeon us with. And that's always been the case. And the whole refugees and UNRWA, all of that, they've propagated the refugees that as an entity. They've even, let's say, the definition of a refugee is unique, right?
Yes.
According to UNRWA, there's no other such definition. It's so broad. It includes people that emigrated to the area 2 years before the 48 war, right? And the descendants, it's crazy, but it's a way to use, to perpetuate their victimhood and that refugee status in order to keep them there, in order to eventually destroy Israel. Now, if you solve this so-called refugee issue, then what do you have to use against Israel, right? So there's something else going on.
Somebody posted a very interesting, there's another one of my favorite sci-fi authors, Devin Erickson, very, very smart guy, and I don't necessarily agree with him on every point. He's also polygamous.
So that's one point you don't agree with.
But wow, smart guy.
Yeah.
But one little soundbite that I loved from him is that bureaucrats do not exist to solve problems. They exist to address them. Okay. The difference between addressing a problem and solving a problem is addressing means that you're ticking all the boxes of looking like you're doing the right things while still preserving your job.
Yeah.
Because if the problem goes away, then you lose your job.
Yeah. But in Unira's case, they're not trying to address it. They're trying to perpetuate it.
That's right. They're trying to. They're
keep the problem
They're
going.
addressing it and trying to keep it going because
they ultimately see that the solution is a final solution. And I mean, I choose my words wisely there.
Yeah. Yeah. So now there's this very interesting little game theory setup that we've got with what's going to be the end game in Gaza, because now we're talking about negotiating for phase 2. And it is really a zero-sum game over here. Both sides know it's a zero-sum game because our absolute red line is that Hamas has got to go, right? The only thing that we can perhaps negotiate terms about in terms of that end game, I'm not talking about the hostages. Obviously, we need to get all the hostages back. But the only thing that we're prepared to negotiate is if they're going to go alive or dead.
Yeah.
Right,
that's the area, and we'll let them live somewhere else. Or?
So this is what we can negotiate, and this is what's on the table for you. Would you like to leave Gaza alive or dead?
Yeah.
Okay. Hamas, of course, has drawn their red line that they will not leave, and they must stay in power, and they will never relinquish the demand to destroy Israel. Right. So we're coming into this negotiation where both sides know that neither can ever accommodate the other side's red lines. But in the meantime, there are little tactical things that we're trying to get out. Like we're trying to get out more hostages.
Yes.
And they're trying to get out more terrorists, and more territory to get the IDF to withdraw from more territory. Okay. And of course there are red lines there because Philadelphia. If you withdraw from Philadelphia, then all the arms can start flowing back in again.
Yes.
Okay, so that's going to be one of those red lines. So, and the other thing that Hamas knows is that the only thing that is preventing us from going in and absolutely obliterating them is the fact that they've got human shields. They've got our hostages as human shields.
Yes.
So, and that's also the only currency that they can pay us with. In order to make this, so where is this end game going to go? It's going to taking it right to the end. Hamas can never ever let go of the last living hostage, because the instant that we know that there are no more living hostages in Gaza, it's over. Okay, so that's if you play out this scenario. It's just a question. We're kind of asymptotically going to approach one living hostage left in Gaza.
I see what you're saying. The question is, would Hamas believe that even if there were no hostages, we would still kind of restrict what we're willing to do because of the whole Gazan human shield situation? That's where I don't fully agree with you, because we've always shown, let's say, a reticence to do what really needs to be done to really clean up shop because they're hiding behind civilians, because of that moral compass that we have. Mm-hmm. So that, to me, is still maybe a bit of a trump card, but
it's not a trump card. The trump card is the Jewish hostages.
No. What I'm saying, I agree with that.
They've got
not believe that because we've never shown a willingness to do what really needs to be done in the past.
Yeah.
The question is, do they think now we're fed up and we are willing to now say, screw it, we're going to do things that we hadn't done in the past because we wanted to minimize civilian casualties.
Right.
So that's interesting to me.
And I think in terms of sympathy for civilian casualties, I think
it's less. Because how do you define a civilian?
To put it very gently.
Where there were civilians that captured Shiri and the Bibas boys.
Yes.
Ariel and Kfiri, right? They were involved. They've been implicated up to the eyeballs. You saw them coming in, looting, doing all sorts of atrocities.
Yes.
And we see that the when they were handing over the hostages, these humiliation ceremonies, there were plenty of civilians there, smoking the hookah, there were kids. I'm not saying they all deserve to die, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, I'm making the point that it's not so simple, that the delineation between what is a terrorist and what is a civilian isn't just the clothes that they're wearing, and that there's this sort of symbiotic relationship going on there that put Hamas in power, and that keeps them in power, and that aids and supports them, and that the human shields, some of them, I don't know what the percentages are, but let's be honest, some of the human shields are willing human shields. They're not forced human shields. Yes, I'm sure there are also forced human shields. I'm sure there are Gazans, they've got blackmail on them, and therefore they have to agree, because they play dirty, right? Hamas are going to play dirty. But it's not our job to, start knocking on doors and trying to work out, that's not the way warfare works.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if it's between our lives and theirs, I know what I choose.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not advocating any particular thing, but you understand what I'm saying. Yeah. I don't think we should go out of a way to lose our own lives and our kids' lives, chas v'chalila, and the soldiers, our young, beautiful children, to bend over to overly to avoid any sort of loss of life. It's unfortunate, but it's all on Hamas.
And I may be projecting my own feelings over here, but I especially with these hostage releases of the living and of the dead, I feel like Israeli public opinion has shifted dramatically.
I think so too. I believe so, but you never know. Yeah. Because I thought after October the 7th it shifted dramatically, and we didn't see all these protests against the the legal reform and all of this sort of thing. And we're seeing them again. I'm seeing at least where I live.
We're going to see a lot less of them now that US aid has been cut off.
Yeah, probably. True. They're implicated, of course.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is, you just never know. It's weird. Things are weird in this situation, and not the responses aren't always as rational as one would think.
Yeah.
And people here have a short memory, unfortunately, and coming maybe from a place of good, they want to, they've got this, yefein nefesh, this bleeding heart, a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
But we'll have to wait and see. Things are very unpredictable, obviously.
Yeah.
In every sense.
Very much so. Yeah, the curse of living in interesting times.
Yeah, exactly. The Chinese New Year curse.
Yeah. So, perhaps in summary, what do you see? Your 5-year vision of Israellycool.
My 5-year vision is that Israellycool will first of all continue, but they'll also expand. So I would like to be able to, for instance, do videos like we're doing now, and get back into podcasting. But at the end of the day, it all will rely on support. At the end of the day, I would love to continue to be able to do Israellycool full time, but that will all be predicated on the funding that we get. Yeah. If we get the funding, then it's all systems go. Because I'm dedicated to this, it gives my life even more meaning than it already has. Yeah. I believe it's making a difference in a small way. I finally worked out what I want to do when I grow up. I was, in my 40s. Well, actually, I started Israellycool when I was in my 20s. I don't want to mislead on my age. Yeah. But let's just say, when I went with the Amutah to make it a full-time non-profit, I was in my 40s. And I would love, it would be, let's say it would be a privilege. It's not a right, but it would be a privilege to be able to continue to do that, to be able to have enough people out there to say, yes, we value what you're doing and we're going to support it because you're doing good.
Yeah.
And I just have so many ideas and so much motivation to be able to continue to do it, even though it's very hard in terms of you dealing with the scum of the earth, and you're tackling them on their battlefield, and you're going in hard in the mud. That's at least what I'm doing with this, and it can make you a little bit crazy. But if you have your eye on the prize, on the ultimate goal, the holy goal, then you find yourself so motivated to do it. You have the strength in the morning to deal with the schmutz. Yeah. And not everyone can do it. So I kind of feel like I need, hopefully I can continue to do this. I would love to, let's put it this way, I'd love if there's no need for me to continue to do this, which would mean anti-Semitism is eradicated, the Mashiach comes, that would be the best case scenario. But if that's not going to be the case, I'd love to be honoured to continue this fight in the best way that I can do it.
Wow, excellent. I'll keep on fighting the good fight.
Thank you, sir.
And Hatzlacha Rabba should have lots of success and swing a lot of people over to the good.
Thank you so
Hatzlacha.
much. Toda.
Hakol Sababa, where life takes a spin. Join the fun, let the talk begin. Hakol Sababa, where life takes a spin. Join the fun, let the talk begin.